Good morning. For those of you that don't know us, I'm Doug. This is my beloved Craig, and our little sidekick here, Charlie, who goes with me everywhere I go, including church. And it's about his favorite place to be because we come driving down the road, and the only thing we have to ask him if he's ready to go to church, and he goes crazy. So he is ready to be here, and we are so glad to be here today. And that we have both talked here in the past separately, but we thought today, kind of like the chewing gum experience, you get two at the same time. So we're going to do a talk on extraordinary minds, like Bill said. And what I'd like to do is start with an opening prayer. And I'm finding my notes here. Here we go. All right, if you would, center yourselves, get quiet, rested, close your eyes. Mother, Father God, I call upon my spirit guides, ancestors, guardian angels, and ascended masters who have forged a path for all of us to follow in their footsteps as we honor some of those brilliant minds that we're about to speak of today. Craig and I have clear communication as we work together, sharing stories of some of those who have walked before us. So may our minds work together to demonstrate love and appreciation for all those beautiful souls who have led the way for everyone else. And may our words reveal more than they can obscure. And most of all, may our minds, eyes, and tongues be guided by our hearts, and we communicate the language far older than words. And with that, we say we are grateful for guiding us as we share these words today with our spiritual family here at Spiritual Light Center Franklin. And so it is. And I also wanted to mention that we did say that today is Martin Luther King's birthday, and our president, Joe Biden, is at his church in Atlanta speaking today, but he couldn't get tickets to come to SLC Franklin, so he had to go to Atlanta. He heard we were going to be here, and he couldn't come. So the president went on down to Atlanta to honor Martin Luther today. So you're at the best part here today. So Craig's going to talk from here, and then I'll be back up.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to get rid of this because I'll hit myself with it probably. So it's great to be back, and thank you for letting us speak today. As you know, I usually try to bring a crystal in and involve it in the talk. So today I brought lapis lazuli, which I bought this and it actually glows in the dark, which I love. But lapis lazuli is about speaking your truth, having courage and inner peace and freedom. So I thought that was a really special stone to have, particularly on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And of course, it is also Bill Grove's birthday, and she's not here, but it's Ashley Peterson's birthday today as well. So it clearly is an extraordinary day. And we titled our talk today, Extraordinary Minds. You know, I know that many of you know that I can't give a talk without bringing a movie into it. You knew that was going to happen. Doug said, do you have to do the movie thing this time? I said, yes, I have to do the movie thing. It's my trademark. It's my brand. So people often ask, or I often ask people, what's your favorite movie of all time? And usually I get the same answer, which I can't pick one. You know, is it drama? Is it comedy? Is it old movies? Is it sci-fi? I can't pick one. Very rarely does someone say, I know what it is and I have one. I am one of those people. I have a favorite movie of all time. It's always been my favorite movie since the minute I saw it. And it's kind of unusual. I don't know if many of you have heard of it. It came out in 1980 and it's called Ordinary People. Has anyone heard or seen Ordinary People? It is obviously my favorite film of all time, so I love it. It is stars Donald Sutherland, Mary Tyler Moore, and Timothy Hutton, who won an Academy Award for his very first movie ever. He's one of the few people in history who's done that. And anyway, it is about a family, an ordinary family that is going along in their life until tragedy strikes. And the thing I love the most about the movie is not necessarily the plot of the movie, even is the thing I think that the movie, the author, the director did so well is you get to see every side of the character. So the characters have good in them, they have bad in them. Sometimes you cheer for them, sometimes you hate them. But the thing I love is that you always can understand their point of view, even when you don't like them. In fact, it was kind of a really interesting thing at the time because the woman who played the mother was Mary Tyler Moore. And of course, everyone knows Mary Tyler Moore, fun, happy, comedy. And it was a serious, dark role for her. And everyone's like, how can she, that's Mary Tyler Moore. We love Mary Tyler Moore. But she played this really complex character. And I loved the fact that while you didn't like her character, you could understand it. And I reflected upon this concept of ordinary people, about being ordinary. What does it mean to be ordinary or to be extraordinary? What's the difference? And when we think about it, we all have good in us. We all have things that are not so good in us, but we all are special and unique and extraordinary in our own right. So when we think about extraordinary people, extraordinary minds, we have to include ourselves and each other in that discussion, because it's not just those famous people that have made a difference, but it's all of us that continue to make a difference. You're going to get 2 for 1 this week because I'm going to give you another movie, which is a movie I'm sure you all know, which is It's a Wonderful Life. And for those of you who've seen It's a Wonderful Life, of course, it's about George Bailey, who runs into some challenges, no fault of his own. And his guardian angel comes down and shows him what the world would have been like if he hadn't been in it. And I think that's a wonderful thing, because what he sees is that he hadn't seen before is all the amazing things that he's done in his life that he didn't consider amazing, because they were just maybe one-off things. He was nice to someone in a certain circumstance, and that had rippling repercussions over time and made a huge difference in the world that he didn't know of. And I love that movie, not only because it's a feel-good holiday movie that we watch usually at Christmas time, but because think about yourself. There are probably lasting, rippling things that have happened in the world because that you don't even know about because you have been in it, right? You don't have to do something, life-changing, like save someone's life or, it's not about that. It's about the fact that you can make a difference and you can change someone, and then that has a rippling effect. They go on to do something, and then the person they help goes on to do something. And I reflected about that when I thought about extraordinary people, particularly because when you think about Martin Luther King Jr., he didn't just wake up one day and become extraordinary. He was the product of his family who helped him and guided him in his life, of his friends that he interacted with, of his ancestors before that. He was a product of the universe moving and acting through time and making him who he was, right? So it's something that lives in all of us as well. So when Doug and I were thinking about extraordinary minds, we thought, who should we talk about? We initially agreed that we didn't want to get up here and talk about people you knew about. We could easily get up here and extol the virtues of Mother Teresa or Gandhi, but we thought we would pick some unusual, maybe tell some stories about some people you may not know, which hopefully will give you a laugh, but also get you to think about, I guess, impacts that you can have in the world and history. And they may not be things that live in the history books, but they live in spirit. So I tell you what, it is amazing. If you Google religious leaders from history, you learn a lot. I had no idea there were as many religions and as many belief systems in the world as there are. It was truly amazing. But I'm going to start off with saints, because saints always pop up. You talk about religious figures, saints always pop up. So since we just went through Christmas, I'm going to talk first about Saint Nicholas. So jolly old St. Nicholas was a real person. He was a Greek bishop. He lived from around 27 BC. So St. Nicholas, the legend arose from St. Nicholas because he was a man who believed in helping the poor. He came from a wealthy background, and actually when his parents passed away, he gave away their fortune. He didn't just take their fortune, he gave it away to the poor. But there's a story about a man that lived in his town, widowed, 3 daughters, and he lost all his money, lost his fortune. It was tragic. And so Nicholas wanted to help him. Now, the man had 3 daughters, and back in those days, you had to give a dowry when your daughters got married. If you didn't have a dowry, no one wanted your daughter. So without the dowry, his daughters were not in for a good life, and in fact, they had talked about the only course at that point for women was prostitution. If you didn't have a dowry and marry well, that's what happened to you. So Nicholas went to the man's house. He wanted to help him, but he knew the man was proud and wouldn't just accept an outright gift. So he went with a bag of gold, snuck around his house at night, and kind of pried open his window and dropped the bag of gold in the house and then departed. So the man found the money, had a dowry for his first daughter, got her married. Great. He's in a good place. He's like, okay, one of the 3, that's great. So a couple weeks later, St. Nicholas does the same thing. He sneaks around, drops the bag of gold, bingo, the second daughter can get married. So now it's just the man and his 3rd daughter. And he's thinking, well, I wonder if this is going to happen again. I'm going to catch whoever's doing this. And so he stays up night after night after night after night in anticipation and eagerness. And St. Nicholas surely comes around, drops the bag of gold in, except the man is waiting, and he finds Nicholas, and he drops down to his knees, and he thanks him, and he says he wants to go through the town and tell everyone in the town what a great man Nicholas is. And Nicholas says, no, I don't want you to do that. It's not about any glory for me. This is about you and helping your daughters. I don't want any glory for me. And so that's where kind of this notion of this surprise kind of St. Nicholas character comes to help, and brings presents and leaves them for you, and you don't know really anything about him. And so that's where the legend came from. But it was really about a man who was focused on helping the poor. I have to tell you an aside story, because there are a number of different legends. One of them is rather interesting, and it was that St. Nicholas ran across during a time of famine, and there was a butcher, and he had 3 kids, and he was starving. And so he decided he was going to pickle his 3 kids and pass them off as ham. And so St. Nicholas came and intervened, saved the children from a terrible fate. And by just, his worldly goods, helping the man out. And so I thought that's a little more gruesome version of the story. Just think we'd all have pickled ham if that story had lived on. But anyway, needless to say, all the saints have a feast day. I don't know if y'all knew that, but December 6th is actually St. Nicholas feast day. And so if you're in Europe, I think it's particularly in the Netherlands, all the children put out shoes on the doorsteps so that they can get treats from St. Nicholas, because that's his feast day. So that's a little story about St. Nicholas. I also wanted to tell a story about St. Patrick, because it's going to be St. Patrick's Day soon, right? So St. Patrick, obviously, what do you think about when you think St. Patrick is Irish? So he's actually the patron saint of Ireland. And he was also someone that was very much into helping the poor, doing good deeds. And in fact, from the Irish part of it, he's the first person who took the shamrock and used that to illustrate the idea of the Holy Trinity, God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in one being, that it lives within us and it's all within us. And he used this shamrock, of course, because it's Irish. But guess what? He wasn't Irish. He was British. And at 16, he was captured by Irish pirates, sold into slavery, and he worked many years as a slave in Ireland until he could escape and go back to his home in Britain. But he was so moved by the other folks that he saw in Britain that were, or in Ireland, that were suffering from either famine or whatever it was, that he actually went back to Ireland to help them out. And that's where the legend comes of St. Patrick in Ireland. He wasn't really Irish, he was British, but it was his love and honor of those people that needed him that brought that about. The other one I'll mention, Saint, is, of course, Saint Francis of Assisi, someone who's dear to my heart. He lived in the 1200s because he was the patron saint of animals, and also the patron saint of, I didn't realize the environment. And he was also someone who believed in a simple life, and someone who really focused and really wanted to help people. In fact, a lot of times in pictures of him, you'll see him wearing a kind of a burlap robe and a rope as a belt. Lived very simply. He was someone that was extraordinary because even though he lived a simple life, he started the Order of the Franciscans, which was a special order, and he was the first person in history that had the Pope acknowledge his order of religious belief outside of strict Catholicism. So look at this man just by helping the poor, made an amazing difference, and got the Pope to recognize and understand him. So all these saints I wanted to bring up just as folks who really were focused on helping others, ended up getting amazing legends about them, right? But really at the heart of them, it's not so much about they were these amazing people, it's that they focused on the everyday people that needed their help the most, which really moved me about the saints. Now, I want to tell you a couple story about women, because women have either been ignored by religions or really cast in more of a subservient role throughout the year. So there's a couple women that I found when I was doing some research that were really extraordinary. Now, the first one is Jezebel. What do you think of when you hear Jezebel? Loose woman. Yeah, nothing good, right? Jezebel is not a person that you think about with any admiration. But let me tell you the story of Jezebel real quick, is that from a geography perspective, there was Israel and then there was Polynesia. And Jezebel was from Polynesia. And the two kings wanted to make a pact, as a lot of countries do. And so Jezebel from Polynesia ended up marrying the son of the guy from Israel, and then she became the queen of Israel. But Jezebel worshiped Baal, who was the god of nature. And so when she moved to Israel, moved into the palace and everything, she wanted to continue worshiping this god of nature. She believed very much in the beauty and the humanity of nature. And more than that, she believed in religious diversity, because she felt that everyone should be able to worship and feel guided by what moved them in their life, as long as they were people of God. Didn't matter a specific God. Well, that was not well accepted in Israel, let me tell you. And they eventually threw her off a balcony where she was eaten by dogs, which is what the legend says. But the thing that's interesting, and she kind of got this harlot impression, because right before she died, the general was coming to kill her. She knew the general was coming to kill her, and so she dressed up, she put makeup on, and everyone assumed that was because they thought she was going to seduce the general so that she could live. And in reality, what she was doing is she was preparing herself for death. She wanted to be ready for what was coming next. But here's this woman who really was a trailblazer for women, who got this horrible reputation as a harlot, which unfortunately happened to a lot of women that tried to be strong religiously. The other one that I want to mention that I think is fascinating is a lady named Anne Hutchinson. Now, she was a woman that was part of the original group of pilgrims that came over from England and established the US colonies. And of course, the Puritans, why did they leave England? Because they were being religiously persecuted for what they believed. So they left England, they went to the US so that they could have, religious, that they could worship who they wanted, when they wanted, etc. Well, Anne Hutchinson, who some could say was the founder of the modern Bible study, actually had the local women from the colony come over to her house and they would discuss the preacher's sermons and etc. Well, she started to think different thoughts about what she heard from the male preacher. So the male preachers believed very much in what they called the covenant of works, which meant that if you didn't follow the laws of the Bible exactly, that you weren't going to go to heaven. That's what the Puritans believed. You had to follow it word by word. And Hutchinson believed that grace was in all of us and that we didn't have to earn it, but that God was with us and Spirit was with us. And so she espoused what they called the covenant of grace, which meant that grace lives within us. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to buy it or have a checklist. And guess what? Because of that, she was expelled from the Puritan colony. So the group of people who fled religious persecution turned around and then became persecutors themselves. And so it was really, again, an example of a strong woman putting her views forward who end up getting exiled. And, she didn't come to a good end, but it really made me think about here people believed what they thought was right, stood up for what they thought was right, regardless of what the consequences were, what society said. Now, I'm not suggesting we all need to go out and be rebels and submit ourselves to certain death. But what I am suggesting is that in a land where a lot of times you're not accepted or even rejected for your belief system, isn't it refreshing to know that we're not alone sometimes, that people that have gone before have also fought for the same thing? And I really just thought that was so powerful. The next group I wanted to talk about was a group who really believed that and espoused this idea that God lived in all of us, that God was us. And there's some interesting names, which I probably won't get right. So the first I thought was great was a guy named Sri Ramakrishna, who was a Bengali mystic. And he actually spent his life studying all religions. He didn't just study one or followed one, he followed all of them. And he ended up concluding that you didn't have to be one way or another to reach God, that the path to God was in any religion, as long as you had belief and you lived a life of good works on the world, right? That it wasn't just one religion that was the best. I thought that was powerful. I'd never heard of him before. Like, wow. And he had a follower who continued his work, and actually he formed the Parliament of World Religions in 1893 and worked to unify all religions, not to get people to stop their beliefs in any one system, but to get everyone to stop fighting because you didn't like people's beliefs, and bring everyone together and realize that we could all get to God. And again, I thought that was just a powerful concept, that it's not the type of religion, it's the spirituality that brings you closer to God. There were some, obviously also other interesting folks along the way. I realized that a lot of wellness practices came out of religion, which I didn't realize. The founder of the Quakers was a man named George Fox, and he believed that religion was about equality. So his focus was on everyone was equal. And he also developed silence and meditation for the first time in a religious service. So he is the one that we will credit with the meditations that Ashley does, because he brought it to life. There was also a gentleman by the name of Paramashana Yogananda, which I had never heard of. He was a Hindu monk, and he founded something called the Self-Realization Fellowship. And what that was the first use of yoga in society. He was credited with bringing yoga to the world. So isn't it interesting also that religions and religious people helped us with a lot of these practices that you may not necessarily think of as religious, right? You don't necessarily think of meditation or yoga as religious practices, but they're really all about calming the mind and centering yourself in this wonderful belief of spirituality, which I thought was amazing. There's also a group of people who really focused on good works, right? That religion was truly about good works. How could you do the best for other people in the world? And the list is hugely long of folks like that. I mean, there's folks like Martin Luther, who broke away from the Catholic Church, founded Protestantism, because he was sick of the fact that at that time in the Catholic Church, the way to get to heaven was to buy your way into it. If you gave a lot of money to the church and bribed the right people, you got the correct blessing, and you became you got the key to heaven, the golden ticket. Well, he fought against that and believed that religion was not about that. And then his follower, John Wesley, who founded Methodism, truly believed that religion was about the role of social service and cultivating love for other people, right? So again, it was about doing good works and helping others that was so amazing in that. And in fact, last one I wanted to mention was someone named Abbé Pierre, who was a French Catholic priest who founded Emmaus, I think I'm saying that right, which is a movement that was specifically devoted to helping poor and the homeless, and that his religion was all about how could you do your best by helping others. So I hope you can see that there's this trend here of religious and spiritual people that were truly extraordinary by doing ordinary things, right? There's nothing necessarily mind-blowing about doing good works, helping someone else, feeding the poor, centering yourself in spirituality, meditating. I mean, we all do those things at one time or another, but here are extraordinary people who did it, which means by sheer transference, we are all extraordinary people when we do that. And we should think of ourselves as extraordinary in making a difference. I want to end up with a couple of really fun examples that I found. So they don't necessarily fit into a class of people, but I thought that were super fun. One was Galileo. You don't know if you know, Galileo was developed and thought of many things, but he focused on astronomy, and he's the one that discovered that the planets revolved around the sun. It was called heliocentrism. And by discovering that, that was a no-no with the church. They did not like that at all. They thought he was a heretic. And in fact, from the minute he made that announcement to the rest of his life, he was put on house arrest. He was essentially arrested as a heretic for coming up with that. And it wasn't until 1992 that the Catholic Church pardoned him and actually said they were sorry for their persecution of Galileo, which I thought was interesting. It took a long time, but the thing is that Galileo was very religious and spiritual, but he felt that God had called him to discover what science meant for us and how to use science to create better lives. And so it wasn't that it was exclusive from religion, but it was part of religion. It was something that God called him to do. The final person I want to mention is C.S. Lewis. I don't know if you all know C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. So you don't necessarily think of him as a religious person, but he was very religious. When he was in World War I, he had a buddy that they both went to World War I together, and they made a pact that if either one of them was killed, that the other one would take care of that person's family. So C.S. Lewis's friend was killed, and he spent the rest of his life taking care of his buddy's family. But when that happened, he turned to atheism because he felt like, why would God let this terrible thing happen to my friend? Why do terrible things happen in life? Why does God let war happen? Why does God let these things happen? So he struggled with that and was an atheist for decades until he met J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote the Lord of the Rings trilogy, someone you also don't necessarily think of as religious. But J.R.R. Tolkien helped him realize and come back to Christianity, and they became something called apologists. And apologists are a group of people who tackle those tough questions. Why does bad things happen? And they love that. They take those challenging questions and they address them. That's the beliefs, that's what kind of this group of people do. And in fact, many of his novels are all about that. If you want an interesting read a book called The Screwtape Letters. It's by C.S. Lewis, and it's about a devil. His name is Screwtape, and he has his minions, and one of them is called Wormwood. And so he writes these letters to Wormwood, instructing him how to bring the downfall of the human he's assigned to, right? Here's the things you can do to lead this human astray. And it addresses those deep topics of, make this human feel grief, take this thing away from the human, take the dream and make sure that it doesn't happen to them, and watch the human descend away from his spirituality. And what happens is, of course, the human doesn't let that happen, but becomes more spiritual. And Screwtape and Wormwood just can't understand it, and they keep trying harder and harder. It's really it's fun. It's written to be fun, but it also has that meaning. So I hope some of these things were fun little stories, but I wanted to just bring them up to let you know that, again, we probably all have those people we think are extraordinary, and we probably wake up every morning and think, well, we're just ordinary. I'm just a normal person. I'm just going to live my day. I can't really do much to change the world. And in fact, we can, just by being the spiritual creatures that we all are. We all are extraordinary. In fact, I look in the audience and so many extraordinary things that you have done to impact my life that you probably don't even know. And I could mention one for each one of you, and I'm not going to do that, but since it's his birthday, I will say that, if it wasn't for Bill and Doug running into each other, and Doug and Bill striking up a conversation with Doug, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have been exposed to this wonderful family, and wouldn't have spent so much time exploring my own spirituality. It really changed my life. It's just a simple conversation in I think it was a pet groomer, wasn't it? Or was it right? Just a casual little conversation, and it ended up changing so much. And it's just those little things I mentioned. To Rhonda always writes notes to the speakers. She writes lovely, beautiful notes, and I have them. I save them because when I'm feeling down, I read them, and they make me feel like, yeah, don't feel blue. So I just wanted to let you know that everyone does that. Everyone does those things, and you have no idea. So as you walk out of here today, remember that you are the extraordinary one. Doug, I'm going to call you back up, and you are going to have a closing prayer for us. That was wonderful. Thank you.
So yes, he's right. There are those people that are in our lives every single day. And I will take a moment. I look out at Larry and Nancy and see nothing but two people who emanate love. And it's always nice to see people who have found love later in life. And they emanate love all the time. And there's just so many different people here that bring so many different joys. I mean, Sue has expanded my knowledge of plants and gardening like you would never believe. It's just incredible. And it's interesting, like Craig said, that the people we may know in our little world of people, I recently came across a new term called Framily, F-R-A-M-I-L-Y. And it's those people who are our friends, but we choose them to be our family. And that's what every one of you are to us. You are our family. And we love being here and being a part of this center. It has changed our lives in so many ways. And there are people that are not here today with us, you know, Ashley and Aiden, all the things and the joy that they've brought to us and the different knowledge that they have of unity doing different things. Barbara Vitale has literally changed my life. She was one of the ministers who married Craig and I. You just never know who that person's going to be when you're talking to them at the grocery store or the pet groomer or wherever you may be, of how those ripples, like Craig said, it's going to further in your life at some point when you least expect it, will change your mind, but you will always forever remember that person for what they did for you. And that's, I think, the point we're trying to make today, that he is my extraordinary mind. He is brilliant in so many ways, and has,
No, you are.
No, he
No, you are.
he has brought so much joy to my life in the past 17 years of being together. And I knew that when we were trying to find all these facts about things, that he would do a little bit better job at that part of it than I, because he does have that extraordinary mind and that ability to communicate in a way that I don't. So I just appreciate him, as I know we all have those special people in our life that we're so grateful for. We didn't bring up people like Mary Baker Eddy or Ernest Holmes or Thich Nhat Hanh or any of those people that we know what they've done, or Martin Luther King. We all know about that. We wanted to bring about some knowledge to you that you may not necessarily have known about some of the people who, like Craig said, got persecuted for what they believed in. So that's it. Let's go ahead and do a closing prayer. And again, if you would quiet your mind, close your eyes. Spirit, I call upon you now to express gratitude for guiding us today in the words that we have shared with our family, those who are our friends and our spiritual family. We give immense gratitude for showing us the way not to mix religion with spirituality, as they are mutually unrelated. Religions are beliefs forged in our minds, where spirituality is pure energy, as is white light, the most powerful of all energies. We are all powerful spiritual beings periodically. We're just simply wearing a physical body on our visits to Earth. We're here to learn the lessons of physicality and claim our power with intentional thought. And so as we leave today, this beautiful place that we claim as our spiritual light center, we call upon our spirit guides and angels of the highest light to guide all of us to make the decisions that will bring us joy and honor our soul's blueprint. Allow us to make decisions that benefit ourselves, others, and the entire world as those who have done it before us that we spoke about today. Hold us in divine love so we may remain open and grateful for all the signs that you send to us every moment. Let your light of truth and love wash over all of us to give us the courage to stay humble and always seek your counsel first for the betterment of the circle of life. Show us how to pair high vibrational thoughts with high vibrational actions. And with that, we say thank you, thank you, thank you. And so it is.